To Evolving Ideas. My name is ELAINE SMITHA. The show is dedicated to new and innovative concepts, revolving our consciousness into a greater beingness. My guest today is Preston Nichols. I would call him an electronic genius, a former assistant engineer for the Montauk Project in Montauk, New York, and he's visiting this area to give us some information about how the Montauk Project was done, actually. So what would you like to add to your introduction, Preston?
You said everything.
I did. Wonderful. Well, for many of our viewers, Montauk Project is somewhat of a mystery. Some people have probably heard about the Philadelphia experiment. Many may have seen the movie, which gives them an initiation, so to speak, into the paranormal usage in terms of battleships disappearing. So would you like to convey some background information into this to get us going on the Philadelphia experiment?
Well, the Philadelphia experiment was known as Project Rainbow. It was done during World War II at the time that the U.S. government, the Navy, and the military was looking for that super secret weapon to win the war. We were losing the war. It was thought that since our shipping was being hit by German U-boats, that if we could somehow make a ship invisible, both optically and radar invisible, we would lose less merchant marine ships carrying supplies and less troop ships carrying troops.
Was the initial impact or impulse on that to make it visibly disappear? I mean, wasn't it just radar invisible?
Well, that's the common legend, that it was radar invisible. The reason for that was they had to sight the ships in a convoy and didn't want the ships banging into each other. So it was originally to be fully invisible or to make it radar invisible. It's just the amount you take the ship and put it out of the space-time continuum, whether it's invisible to low-frequency radiation or higher-frequency radiation, which is radar versus optical.
And the range is just very narrow.
Right. It's a very narrow range.
So it'd be like turning the dial up on your radio. You would be dialing to a little higher frequency, which would cause it to become
more invisible. Yeah.
More invisible. So for our viewers, let's just briefly give an overview of how that happened and what happened. And
well, what they essentially did was put a number of coils on the deck of the Eldridge.
Okay, USS Eldridge, which was
a destroyer escort,
harbor.
Which was in the Philadelphia harbor, and they energized a very large VHF transmitter that drove antennas on the mast. They were coupling electric and magnetic fields to create, so to speak, a rotating cylinder of energy around the ship. This would warp space-time locally inside the cylinder, and the idea was to take the ship slightly out of our space and time so it would be there but it wouldn't be visible. They turned this thing on, and because of a number of mistakes or possibly even a number of intentional errors, they connected through space and time to a project in the future known as the Montauk Project.
Yeah, I think for many people that connection becomes so obscure because in our reality we don't really have anything that relates to that. And so when we start talking about space-time continuums and some of these terms that are bantered around, for many of our viewers are not really up on that, and so I feel like we need to bring them up to snuff so that they have a better understanding.
What they literally did was burn a hole through space and time. So one end of it was August 12, 1943, and the other end came out August 12, 1983.
So it's like a tunnel in time.
A time tunnel, a space-time tunnel.
That really seems so bizarre to our way of thinking in three-dimensional reality, and our experience is not exposed to that.
Very true.
I mean, there's only, say, well, a handful of people, so to speak, who are really, and I know there's more than that, but just for the metaphor, that have a real knowledge about this. And I don't think the general public is reading kinds of materials that would give them that kind of a background.
Well, the general public is starting to get it in magazines like
This is
Science
true.
News and
This
Space
is
Time,
true.
you know, Scientific American.
This is true, and that's helpful because that helps us all to grow. So one of the things that happened with that Philadelphia experiment was that the ship was caught between two paradigms on the space-time continuum where it wasn't sure that it was here or there.
Right.
And as a result of that, then there were crewmen who were caught in this space-time.
Yeah, a number of crewmen jumped overboard.
A number of them jumped overboard. Some were caught in the bulkheads of the...
Well, that's a different phenomenon.
Yes.
That's where they actually drifted in space and time, and when the ship came back to physicality, they rematerialized inside of a bulkhead.
Uh-huh.
So you remember, when you enter into the space-time tunnel, at a point, you're in the non-physical reality entirely, where you become patterns of electromagnetic waves.
Oh, that's a whole subject right there.
Or-
we're talking about hyperspace.
Yeah, or as psychics like to call it, they become patterns of vibes. They become vibrations. Every solid object starts out as a vibration on the space-time continuum. In order to go into the whole, you return to that pattern of vibration in the space-time continuum. And if you're here, and when you become non-physical, when you become a vibration, if it drifts up like that, you rematerialize and you're in the deck of the ship.
Mm-hmm. So this is kind of Star Trek.
Very much so.
Mm-hmm. And I think that helps our viewers to have a better understanding about materialization and dematerialization. So there were lots of problems with that project, and as I understand it, Einstein originally was involved with that, and Tesla
was involved.
Nikola Tesla was involved with that project, and Dr. Robert von Neumann.
It's Dr. John von Neumann.
John von Neumann. I know another doctor named Robert von Neumann, so it gets a little confusing sometimes. So it had brilliant minds.
Very brilliant.
And
well, remember, you were dealing here with an avant-garde project during the World War II time, which had to have brilliant minds conceptualizing it.
And so as a result of that, Einstein had some problems, and Tesla too, didn't they, with seeing that there were going to be problems with the with human life.
Well, Tesla saw the problems, and reportedly, according to the work of Bielek, Tesla bowed out of it because he was told of the problems by somebody, and John von Neumann took the project over. Albert Einstein, was a consultant that generated the theory base. It was really either Nikola Tesla or John von Neumann that applied the theory base.
But they saw the problems that the crew might have. And that's kind of interesting because we're looking at biological forms as opposed to inorganic materials, and the effects of this kind of activity on both of them and how different it is. So let's go on from there now. And it was such a bizarre thing that for us to think that you could start off in 1943 and end up in 1983 is mind-boggling, and we have no conception now. Doesn't this bring into play the parallel universe concept?
Well, it can, because the space between 1943 and 1983, although it's infinitesimally small, it still can be considered a universe within itself, that since it's locked into the two ends, has to parallel our universe. In fact, that's a whole subject of the Montauk Project, is the parallel universes. And how we created our own universe that we're in now as a parallel universe to the Creator's universe.
Wow. I think we'd have to do another show on that one. So I want to proceed with Montauk, because Montauk was the center of the activity, and I know from some of the early videos that you produced that there were 4 diesel generators on top of this one building, or diesel engines, excuse me, is that correct? Or is that a misunderstanding?
Well, the diesel generators weren't on top of a building, they were in a building.
Oh, they were in the building.
Probably you were looking at the giant motors, the 4 big motors that spun the antennas.
That was it.
You know, the old Sage radar antenna. See, the Montauk Project evolved out of the Philadelphia experiment in as much as they were attempting to make the Philadelphia experiment work, hence we got our stealth technology of modern day. And from that, it evolved into a mind studying project, because the Philadelphia experiment joined an already existing project on studying of the consciousness and mind of mankind, known as the Phoenix Project. That work was done at Brookhaven National Lab, and it was noted that we have definite evidence at this point that the mind of man is subject to electromagnetic fields. This is in the late 60s, early 70s now. And the group at Brookhaven Lab wanted to study this further with the thought of developing technology that could be used as a control modality to, control crowds, control riots, make the enemy surrender. Congress didn't want that because it was too politically active. Mm-hmm. So they went to the military and said, would you be interested in a device that you throw the switch and the enemy surrenders? And the military says, definitely, yes. Mm-hmm. This is the dream of every tactician, is to win the war without firing a shot.
Yes. And didn't we see that with the Iraqis?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we did. The helicopters. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the project moved out to Montauk Point because it was secluded, off by itself. Very few people even knew of the existence of that base. And out there, they developed literally a mind amplifier device which would broadcast with a lot of power whatever concept or whatever virtual reality the person at the input side of this thing was dreaming up or thinking, so to speak. And with that, they're able to control people's minds, what they were thinking. They're able to create objects out of the background ether. And later on, with the addition of a particle accelerator and a special antenna structure, they were actually able to bend space and time and create a time machine, or a time tunnel, so to speak.
This is all really wild. Preston has written a couple of books. Montauk Project, which is the first one that he wrote, that deals with this whole project and would give a lot of information to viewers. It's such a specialized book that I feel that we need to let people know that there is information available, but it's not available anyplace else. This is it. So, but this gives a lot of background information into things that were happening with the government, mm-hmm. and with mind control and
time travel.
And time travel. So, and then he's got this other book that he followed up with called Montauk Revisited, which deals with adventures in synchronicity. And then your new book that's coming out will be
The Pyramids of Montauk, which is an accounting of how special the Montauk site is. Mm-hmm. It's also an accounting, of who actually owns the site today. We also go into a lot of more modern day information on mind control technologies.
So that kind of technology is being used today. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important for our audience to recognize that that we are being manipulated in a mm-hmm. sense by
in many ways.
In many ways. It's mind-boggling the amount of input that comes into us, thoughts that are not really ours, mm-hmm. initially generated, but on which we act. Mm-hmm. And there's many modes on that. And
the message here is to consider every thought, is it yours, and where did it come from?
And where did it come from? And of course, television is putting a lot of that mm-hmm. Through their programming.
Yeah, there's many modalities coming through the TV tube.
Television, many through. What? And, this is kind of just a brief aside, but could you just kind of survey that just briefly?
Well, you have subliminals, which is audio and video hidden within the frames of a TV picture with a message. Audio, of course, is somebody saying, buy Kellogg's cornflakes, below the zero VU, as we call it, of the commercial. Also, the sync signals, the synchronization that makes your TV picture synchronized with the picture at the TV station, can carry what's known as phase modulation or time modulation within itself that can do transmissions that will go directly into brain and mind consciousness.
Through just the visual cortex?
Through the non-visual, through the through the physics and the quantum side.
In that field around us.
The field emanating from the tube itself, from the cathode ray tube.
Right, and I understand that even if a television is plugged into the wall, that there is a flyback transformer inside of that is still able to...
No, the only thing that's on in the television when it's off is the remote control circuitry.
I thought that there was something where the reason why
Some
it
of 'em-
snaps on immediately when you...
Okay, that's the filament in the cathode ray tube. Sometimes the filament is lit at all times in the TV set, but typically the flyback and the deflection circuits are off, and the video
if you
circuits are off.
unplug it. But if you left it plugged in and just turned off,
Those circuits are still off.
they're still off?
What's on may be the cathode ray tube filament and the remote control circuitry. The rest of the circuitry is shut off.
Okay. Is there any effect that would be coming from those existing
Well, you have to
units that
remember,
are still on?
in space and time, every object has many images in different realities. That TV is off in our reality,
Yes.
but in parallel realities, that TV is on. If you can key in to the parallel reality TV where it's on, then you can work through that TV just because it's physically present in our reality.
Wow, this is really interesting. And then, of course, you have the radio. You're getting subliminals over the radio.
Well, this is
Scalar wave
all this is
technology.
all totally illegal according to FCC regulations, but it still does go on.
And then music. There have been several recording artists who have utilized that technique.
Yes, the
in
Beatles were
forward
one
and
of the first
reverse.
ones. Yep.
Yes, the Beatles and
That's
Madonna.
that's reverse sayings within choruses.
And then, of course, people go out to the shopping malls and they have Don't Steal coming over the music to program.
Both audibly and both through an ELF transmission.
And then there's cellular telephones. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot in our environment, and a lot we don't know yet
True, yep.
about the effect on the human organism. Well, let's get back to the Montauk Project or to the Philadelphia Experiment, whichever your leaning is to expand our awareness. Where would you like to pick up on that?
Well, we cover the nutshell of the Montauk Project.
Okay.
We are going to have a lecture in Olympia, Washington.
Yes, well, this will be after that, but our viewers can always contact me for information about that. But let's go a little bit into the Montauk Project,
Okay.
because one of the things that I remember seeing is that on that base there is a vortex center that is marked, like X marks the spot.
Well, it's marked, it's a traffic circle on the base with buildings around the Vortex Crosspoint. See, Earth has a number of energy centers, just as human beings have energy centers, that the ancient mystics call chakras, which is from the Hindu language. It's a center of energetic activity in the human person. The Earth has the same thing. The Earth has chakras or vortex points. The Indians would locate these points in the woods and arrange rocks to tune them, to control the energy flow in and out of the points. Many of your military bases are built on these cross points. They typically will put a traffic circle around the point and arrange the buildings around the point the way the Indians arranged the rocks, but this is in a much bigger fashion. In fact, at Montauk, they've retuned the point because they've taken out one of the buildings.
Oh, that's interesting. So how do they go about tuning those?
Probably since these bases were built in the 40s and 50s, and we didn't have technology available, they probably brought adepts known as psychics out, dowsed out the points, and then felt where the building should go to tune all the cross points on the military bases for a particular concept into the Earth itself.
So the use of psychics is quite prevalent in the military.
They have what's known as PSYOPs or the PSYCOR. Psi, of course, is from psychic activity.
Psychic activity.
Right.
I think sometimes people think that psychic, that term psychic, is reserved for, say, the metaphysical or New Age community, but the truth is that psychics have been used forever.
They've been used for many, many years. The old soothsayers were psychics.
Right, and really psychic only means that you are drawing on your intuitive ability, which is very highly tuned, fine-tuned, to pick up resonances and frequencies and to be able to relate to them and to
translate the thought forms or frequency transforms.
Yes, and we know even presidents have used psychics for advice. I mean, I think that came out with, was it President Reagan who was exposed to that?
Probably all the presidents have used psychics.
Pretty interesting. And I think that it puts the psychic then into a very reputable position and removes it from just that do-do-do-do status.
Well, you have to remember, the government has a tendency to compartmentalize everything, and they want to keep these special powers to themselves. So they have a tendency to debunk psychics so that they're the only ones that have the use of the psychics, just as they debunk UFO sightings for socialistic reasons, and they don't want the public to know of UFOs as well as that psychic activity really does exist.
But don't you think that people know that UFOs exist?
Oh, sure they do.
I mean, the government can deny them, but the people are saying, yes, but I've seen them. And
so the government will tell you saw a weather balloon.
Yes, well.
Or swamp gas. That's the one I like. Everything is swamp gas. And of course, we know about natural gas.
Yeah. So, well, this Montauk Project is so vast and so...
yeah, we still haven't gotten to the bottom of it yet.
No, and it seems to infiltrate so many different areas of our life that one would not even be aware of if you hadn't come to give us this information. So...
it appears that the Montauk Project was involved in creating our reality that we exist in.
That's really well thought. How would that be? Tell our viewers how that might be.
Well, Montauk was one of a string of many, many, many projects that go back to antiquity and go ahead to the future. They all would connect as an overall space-time project. They all connect together as, so to speak, this super big machine. Now, just as you can't have two Preston Nichols at the same time on a timeline or reality, you can't have two timelines. So when they fed the timeline back on itself, now you're creating a second reality. They can't coexist, so one skews off. The first one skews off, and the new line takes place of the first line. Because the first one that skewed off was the Creator's timeline. For want of better words, God. By whatever name you want to call this entity that thought up the entire creation. He now exists in a timeline away from us. And we exist in a timeline we created ourselves. I'm talking all of us here on this planet and the rest of the intelligent life that has a consciousness in our universe, which essentially is the Milky Way Galaxy. And NASA's been proving this by dating the Milky Way Galaxy as being billions of years old. And the rest of our universe is quadrillions of years old, which is suggesting that we're in a bubble all by ourselves in our galaxy. And that through the Montauk Project and its other sister projects through space and time, going back through space and time, not all the projects are here on this planet, they're on other planets. We literally engineered the reality we're in. This is why New-Agers are told we engineer our reality. We did, and we still do.
Amazing. Now, when you're talking about two different, two Preston Nichols meeting, and you would literally be annihilated if that happened.
That's one of the legends of quantum physics.
That's like the particles meeting
Yeah.
and annihilating.
And it doesn't have to be that way. You can meet yourself and not annihilate each other.
That concept kind of reminds me of this loop. That if you're over here and God is over here, and you are wanting to get over to God, then you're kind of going. Eventually, you would move toward that. It would be like in the infinity symbol.
Okay, the infinity symbol.
The infinity symbol.
That's a caduceus loop.
So if God is in one place and you want to get to God, if you just kept on going, eventually you would get there?
Yeah, but what happens at the center? When you're like this at the center, you could go like this and not cross over to the other side. This is possible. Where the two lines cross in the caduceus loop, you can either go to the other side or you continue back.
But if you were, I'm just going to explore this for just a moment because it's getting really a little bizarre here. But if you were to be here and your other image of who you were still on this timeline, and you got to this cross point and you intersected yourself in this, what would happen?
Unless you were the exact negative energy image of yourself, nothing would happen.
Nothing would happen.
If the antimatter ELAINE met the matter ELAINE at the cross point, it probably could blow our entire reality.
Interesting. Well, we're getting a little far into physics at this point, so I think we probably ought to go back to something that's more relevant for our viewers. So, this Montauk Project, you've been out to that base now since it's been closed.
Oh yes, many times.
But there are still lines that are hooked up out there.
Yeah, we notice. I was told by friends back in around 90 that the base is active again. A friend of mine told me he saw these big transformers being put up on a telephone pole. I went out and looked, and I found this newly refurbished power line that goes to a maintenance building at the Montauk base, hooks to these three huge transformers clustered around the pole, and then goes into the maintenance building. After investigating that, I found that it was anywhere from 1.5 megawatts to 5 megawatts, depending upon who you talk to. Even 1.5 megawatts in a maintenance shed? What are they doing with that kind of power?
Exactly.
The lines beyond the maintenance shed were small lines that would not carry power anywhere else. So the terminus of that line was that maintenance shed. Now, from the other side, they very recently have refurbished the power line coming in, which at this point it appears they got about 60 megawatts of power going into this state park.
Into the state park?
Montauk base today is the the Camp Hero State Park. And that's one thing we investigated in Pyramids of Montauk. We looked at the deed for the Camp Hero State Park. In the way it's worded, the federal government can take the park back at any time for national defense, and there's no mining rights. That means the State Park Commission literally owns to 1 cellar level below ground, which means there could be, by that deed, a whole underground facility that the state people have no jurisdiction over whatsoever.
And so that's where you believe all of this is being...
It's all underground at this point.
Underground.
In 1993, mid-August, I was out there with my radio equipment and picked up pulse transmissions coming out of the state park. And data transmissions, a very complex, semi-random processed data link.
That's interesting for a base that's supposed to be closed.
Yeah, isn't it?
But that base was originally functioning. And when was that functional?
Well, according to official Air Force records from the Air Force archives, the 0773rd Radar Battalion, which is what that was known as, was operational up until 1969, and the base itself was declared derelict and transferred to the GSA, that's General Services Administration, for holding in 1970. And the Air Force does not officially know of any other work done on the base since 1970, when it was turned over as derelict surplus property.
Mm-hmm. So it's been a really long time that it appears.
But of course
on the
we
surface.
know, we know there's activity to at least 1981. We have documentation to 81.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an 11-year period in there that the Air Force does not admit anything happened, even to this day. There's no cover story, folks.
Interesting. Now, was the Navy involved with them there as well?
It appears to be a tri-service project, which is Air Force, Army, and Navy. Army, Fort Hero was originally an Army base. Then the Army Air Corps, when it became the Air Force, got a section of Fort Hero. The Air Force Station is not the entire Fort Hero base. And now, underground is where the Navy is. There's reportedly a sub-pen out at Montauk, under the old base. And right now we have investigations going on through the archives group at the Navy, and we're told that information on the submarine pens out at Montauk is classified to this day. They did admit there were submarine pens out there.
Submarine pens? Well, what does that mean?
That's where a submarine enters this tunnel underwater, comes up into a rock alcove under Montauk Point where there's a water, where there's like a lake, an underground lake. And submarines can enter and not be seen from out of the water and have access to whatever they need to the base area and eventually come out above ground, the people that are on the submarines. In fact, probably the existing day Montauk Project is probably supplied by submarines, and this is why it's still classified. This friend of mine talked to the Navy archivist, and the archivist said it's all classified, and the fellow asked, well, can you tell us where the entrances underwater for the subs are? And he says, well, that's still classified also.
Oh, my.
So he's admitting they're there,
That, yes.
and the fact they wouldn't tell us where they are is saying that they're still being used.
Is there another place in the Pacific? If I'm correct in my memory, there was a meeting between governments of the world and the president and so forth, and they met on a submarine underwater. And I thought it was it in the North Pacific or?
I don't know.
And I wondered at the time when I heard that whether or not there was a certain level underneath the water where they had access to a tunnel underneath that
It's possible.
would take them to another location.
There's underground facilities and underwater facilities all over this planet.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, can you give us a little bit of information about the Montauk with regard to the Psi Corps and some of the things that they did and how they brought in young boys for experimentation and...
Okay, you're talking of what we call the Montauk Boys Project. They have a project that still is ongoing today. The overall project is known as the Monarch Project.
Monarch?
Monarch, like the monarch butterfly.
Like a butterfly.
Right. This is a project where they bring in children, and through many different kinds of means, they condition the mind of the children to be more conducive to being soldiers, workers, however. And Montauk Project paralleled this in what we call the Montauk Boys, because for years we all remember seeing Montauk boys lined up being indoctrinated for something.
And what were the ages of these young boys?
I personally remember seeing them, I would guess, from about maybe 8 to 20 years old, maybe 10 to 20 years old.
And where would they get these young boys?
They would literally grab them off the streets. This is why, even to this day, we have a lot of missing kids in this country. And what they would do is they would somehow, either metaphysically or through brutality, extract the mind from the body, drive the mind out of the body, capture the mind, put the pattern, the frequencies of the mind on a computer, reform that mind on the computer, and then transmit it to a adept person, a psyops person, to reinsert the new mind back in the body. And then these boys would be healed up, return to their parents. They had time games played where they'd be walking out of the facility as they were walking in. So although this may have taken who knows how long, they're only gone for an afternoon, as long as it takes to go to the facility and back from the facility. And they were placed back in with their families to grow up. And today, there's some sort of a super elite defensive, offensive force type unit. Commonly, we're finding that they're used in what's known as Delta Force, which is the military group that goes and polices and recovers crashed UFOs and looks for the aliens from the crashed UFOs. And they do other neat stuff like that. Super secret, very special projects. And some of these guys are in the military officially, and some of them are not in the military officially. But when they're tagged for this work, they're trained at their site since they're little boys to go into this job. In their conscious recollection, if you talk to them, they don't even remember this stuff because it's buried deep within their consciousness.
This sounds a little bit like the UFO sightings and alien abductions.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds
like
it's very close.
There's a fairly large group of ufologists that thoroughly believe that this so-called alien abduction is done by the government, and they're hiding behind the so-called aliens.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I thoroughly believe that we're looking at both alien abduction and government abduction. And, of course, some of the purposes is for the Montauk Project.
So it sounds like there's some ulterior motive that is going on that's much deeper than what we would establish in our mind as being reasonable.
Oh, yes. There's somebody on the planet, a small committee, so to speak, that's pulling the strings for some sort of an orchestrated something. A lot of people believe it's a one-world government takeover of the planet, which in many ways is not bad, but it depends upon who controls this takeover, who's in control. Is it a dictator who's going to crack the whip on everybody, or is it going to be a benevolent force that will be for the betterment of mankind? At this point, we really don't know for sure.
It's hard to say, but based upon some of the things that have been going on, one would begin to question how beneficent it was.
Yeah. We are, at this point, entering a galactic community. So at some point, we have to bury the differences between the different geographic locations known as countries and go to a one-world government. But I personally would like to see a government that's not despotic.
Oh, well, I think we all would. I think
Yes.
we've had enough of that. And really, on this planet, we've had enough of that. So,
we eventually do need a single government.
well,
but
if all
we want the
communities-
government of the right type.
Well, I would think so. So, were the aliens involved in this Montauk Project?
There is an alien involvement. I'm not quite sure whether they're observers, whether they supplied the information for it, or whether they're actual workers.
Or whether they orchestrated it?
Or whether they orchestrated it, I don't know. Because I personally had very little contact with those things. Although I did see them. And I said to my boss there, "That's a lizard man." He says, "Yes, that's an alien." First thing I wondered, was it a person dressed up in a lizard suit?
So it really did look like a lizard. So what we've been hearing reports about lizards is accurate. We had an incident here in our community. I think it was last year. There was a young man who was coming home late from work about 11 o'clock at night, as my memory recalls. And as he approached his home, he went down this road, and all of a sudden his car stopped, and he saw this figure just land in front of him. And he said he was about 8 to 10 foot tall, had huge wings, looked like a lizard, and he just, was just stood there. And this kid is going, he's just terrified. But after he kind of considered it, he says, well, it was just very different. It was very interesting. And then pretty soon that figure disappeared, his car started, and he went home, got his family, went back to that site, and of course nothing was there. Couldn't substantiate anything.
Right.
But he felt definitely that he had seen this. Now, this boy said that he was a high school student, and he said he'd never, he wasn't on drugs, he wasn't doing anything, this was sort of an atypical behavior. And the newspaper, of course, picked it up, and there were pictures that showed that. So
probably drawings.
Yeah, the drawings, yes. So what you're telling us is that this is a reality, that they are possible, that they are there, that they do have that ability to...
Well, our universe, our galaxy, is filled with life. There was a program that Carl Sagan had on PBS where he went through the probabilities of inhabited planets with intelligent life and came up with 99% probability that there are other planets out there. And are they here? Of course they're here.
There was also an article that I read about some people who were going camping with their big camp trailer and ended up on this road where they said that there was a wonderful place for camping, and they got out there, and pretty soon they were confronted and said, you cannot go any further. And these people continued to go just a little bit, and they saw some things, some creatures, turn their truck around and got out of there. And then it was like they were told never to talk about that, never to come back here again. And they began to wonder if that was a government site for experiments where they were creating either virtual reality, or they were doing genetic alteration, or playing around in that regard.
Well, we know at Montauk they were able to create realities. We also know at Montauk there was a lot of genetic research being done. And there is myriads of rumors of the government being involved in research with the aliens in ufology. There's myriads of these rumors. There's an awful lot of smoke.
Yes, you got to. But if there's smoke, there has to be fire someplace. So, if you were to give us some information on what alien groups might be here causing effects, we know about the Orion group, which is more maleficent. Is that correct?
Yes, typically. Then you got the Galactic Confederation, which are in between.
What about the Sirians?
You got Sirius A, Sirius B, who are definitely in the middle of this. Then you got the Pleiadians, who is either a highly elevated group above the Confederation, almost like directors of the Confederation. Then you got the negative Pleiadians, the ones that talk to Adolf Hitler, according to legend. You also have Andromedans that come in through the galactic barrier. There's a group called the Krundashine that reportedly contacted the U.S. government back in the 30s.
So that's the K group.
Yeah, that's the K group.
Okay, and how do you pronounce that?
Krundashine.
Krundashine.
Yeah, Krundashine. Phonetically, it'd be Krondeshine. Would be what we believe is the spelling. That's a phonetic spelling. Human beings are the most common life form in our galaxy. We are very common, folks. And most of the life forms within our galaxy procreate through DNA synthesis and DNA combination, whether it's eggs outside the body, eggs inside the body, it doesn't matter. The DNA structure is essentially the same. And they all can be crossbred through genetic engineering. This is what the legend has that is going on with a lot of alien activity these days, is some sort of a genetic crossbreeding.
Why would they want to do that?
Probably in their mind they're looking to create a being that can live on more planets and be more tolerant of different planetary conditions.
Well, that would preclude a different environment for breathing, because we require oxygen here on this planet.
Well, the oxygen...
That wasn't always true, either.
Well, the oxygen-carbon cycle is the most common cycle in our galaxy, in the universe here. And we always had oxygen on the planet. This planet never had any sign of any other life cycles, such as ammonia, silicon life cycle.
Or hydrogen?
Well, we're part of the hydrogen cycle.
I know that, but I thought maybe there was a primary rather than oxygen.
We are based upon hydrocarbons. Strings of hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen.
Okay, I want to get back to the Philadelphia experiment.
Sure.
And I want you to explain a little bit more in depth about some of the problems that were encountered.
Well, the major problem was that these people, when they created the shell of energy, they did not keep the energy out of the center where the ship was. And the human beings on the ship were being fluxed, so to speak, with this very, very strong electromagnetic field. Remember, we're talking of a field here strong enough to warp space and time.
That means to bend it,
Yeah.
change it, alter it.
Although the energy and the function came out of the future from the Montauk Project. Through the couplings, that site at Philadelphia Harbor, August 12, 1943, got enough energy to warp space and time. Now, if you're dealing with fields that are capable of doing that, you're dealing with fields here that could literally rip the iron out of our hemoglobin. You're dealing with fields here that could literally distort the ionic interchanges in the neurological activity. You're dealing here with fields who can literally distort space and time, and our non-physical mind is already a dynamic space-time distortion function, so to speak. So we're dealing here with fields that can literally warp the non-physical or the superintelligence of a human being.
But that means just absolutely change it,
Mm-hmm.
change our perception of life itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So was that initial impulse to develop something of that nature designed for just, I mean, why would they do that? Was it strictly military? Or?
It was military, although there's a lot of legend at this point that is suggesting the whole Philadelphia experiment was orchestrated from the Montauk Project, such as Edward Cameron, who's known as Al Bielek today, went to, I believe it's Hal Bowen, who was the head admiral of the fleet, and said, why do we have to do the test on August 12th? And Hal Bowen said, it comes from way above, and it's got to be done on August 12th or forget about it. That is suggesting that they wanted the Philadelphia experiment done at a certain place at a certain time to orchestrate this lockup. That's what this is suggesting, as the legend does suggest.
So when you're talking about lockup, that's almost like plugging in two electrical lines. And one doesn't work unless you plug
You're plugging in the
line.
lines.
So you plug into the wall, and that lights the light, and that completes the circuit.
You're completing circuits through space and time.
So there is this 20-year cycle that you have spoken about, from 43 to 63 to 83,
Right.
and the next one would be 2003. So what do you expect to happen in 2003?
I wish I knew. We know there's another project, because we know the lockup goes through the 2003. So we know there has to be somewhere here on this planet, it has to be on this planet, and I suspect it's most likely at Montauk, since Montauk is the site to do it.
It's the center.
It's the center site to do it. There is another project, and we may be looking at the genesis of the new Montauk Project out at Montauk right now. We know there's a vast underground facility that rivals Area 51 out at Montauk Point. There's also a vast underground facility under Brookhaven Lab, and there's a vast underground facility under Rocky Point. The old RCA Worldwide Communications Site has a vast underground. That's an interesting story, because here they had 400-odd acres that RCA was decommissioning as an overseas transmitting site, and it was going out to bid as very valuable property, worth maybe $1 billion. All of a sudden, it becomes a state park. This is very much familiar to Montauk Point base becoming a state park.
Just absolutely absorbed.
Yeah, into the park system.
So how many more park systems in the United States now do do we have that could be involved in this? Because I notice that they're changing, that many of them are becoming international biosphere reserves.
Sure.
Which sounds to me like they're taking it out of the national park system, and on the surface it would appear that perhaps it was being bought up by other countries or being traded off and sold to reduce our debt or something of that nature.
Well, the interesting thing is if you go into the Wetlands Acts, the federal EPA Wetland Act, this is saying that there is all parklands is under the federal government, whether it's state, county, or local town parks. There is an administrative feed from the federal government to all these parklands through the federal EPA. And just as you're talking of making national biospheres, all the parks are being brought under one controlling organization.
For what reason?
Most likely, the parks is where a lot of this clandestine activity that the federal government's going to be involved in is going to be done. In other words, if you have a base that you want to keep in the government hands, the political government does not allow you to maintain that base as a federal site. Make it into a state park. It's still in government hands. That way, you keep the developers away, and they don't want developers buying the land, tearing all the buildings down, digging this huge hole to build a condo and discover, hey, 30 feet down, there's an underground building.
Oh, for heaven's sake. So you really feel that there's a lot of this in the
I think there is, yeah,
districts?
in the park, in our parklands.
In all of our parklands.
You can't say state, national, local parklands. It's all one parkland group
Interesting.
at this point.
Well, that's something I don't think that many of our viewers have heard about before, so that's new information.
We'll follow the newspapers. There's subtle reports of this in the newspapers every other day, roughly.
Yes, but they're like back on page
90,
28 or
yeah,
some 90.
right.
You're certainly not going to find it on the front page.
No.
Whatsoever. So we just have a few minutes left,
Okay.
and I'd like to culminate this with whatever you would like to share with us that you feel our viewers could gain knowledge from that would help them to better understand this whole.
Well, we have spoken here of very deep thought control. The way to beat this is to operate above the level mentally, psychically, so that you're no longer subject to this.
Which would mean exactly?
Knowledge of how they're doing it. The human subconscious mind, people, are a wonderful dynamic function. It's probably the greatest computer in the world.
This is true.
And if the subconscious mind is made aware of this stuff, all the back doors can be boarded up, so to speak, so they cannot gain entrance.
So what I'm hearing you say is that it's better for us to know than not to know.
Yes, if you don't know how they're getting
Exactly. So I hear some people say, oh no, I don't want to know, don't tell me that. But that is really just putting your blinders
in.
on.
But that's the purpose of this book,
And that's, you
is
must
to let the
become
people
aware.
know you're being psychologically, mentally, psychically raped every day. And that you have to be aware of this to defend against it.
So you need to read, you need to gain a lot of knowledge about a lot of different areas so that when something happens, you no longer have the fear attached to it.
Don't be an ostrich and stick your head in the ground.
No, I think that's great advice, because I feel that there are some people who are so fearful that if they find out...
But that's how they get into you, is through
they're
fear.
feeding on your fear.
Right. If you know what's going on, you know how to protect your back doors. There's no reason to be fearful.
I think that's wise.
Fear is your worst enemy.
Yes, it is. And President
Don't deal from fear. Deal from being prepared. Notice, I don't look at it as being paranoid. I look at it as being careful. Deal from care. Don't deal from fear.
Well, I think anytime that we can be aware of our environment and what is going on, that we're in a much better position to protect ourselves, because then your antenna is up.
Sure.
And you can diffuse these situations so that they don't impact you and your psyche.
The mind of man operates way above any technological system we can devise.
Yes, that's
And
true.
provided the mind is aware, and the mind is clear, and the mind is operating properly, you can block out any of this nonsense.
Right.
You can block out the subliminals even. You can block out any of it.
Yes.
Long as you're aware of it.
Well, I think it's important for our viewers to recognize that within them they have the power to do exactly that. To protect
Exactly.
themselves. Well, Preston Nichols, I would like to thank you very much for joining me on this segment of Evolving Ideas and sharing
And it's been my pleasure.
your great knowledge with our viewers.
Thank
and
you.
I know that our audience is going to benefit greatly from all this.
Remember, you all have the knowledge within you. You just have to search out and look for it.
You have the knowledge within you. That's the last message. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us on Evolving Ideas, and join us next time when we explore another avenue to help us evolve. My name is ELAINE SMITHA.